Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and it's time for the third and final part of the Q&A, so let's go ahead and get to it. Alright, first question, let me find them here. Hi Jason, when doing chin-ups after a few sets, I often feel like my biceps is getting tired and becoming a limiting factor. Does this even make sense, and what can I do about it? Thanks, Jason. Alright guys, this is one of those things that people really overcomplicate their big compound movements, and this is one of the reasons why you'll see a lot of coaches. Remember, like when you guys remember when I interviewed CJ Allen and he said, look, a lot of bodybuilders, and he coaches bodybuilders also, he had said that they tend to look at the body as a stack of Legos, and that's really an incorrect way of looking at the body. And here's the point. If your biceps are becoming a limiting factor on your chin-ups, unless you have never trained your biceps and you built a really big back doing deadlifts, like if you deadlifted really heavy for a year and didn't do any bicep training, rows, chin-ups, nothing like that, and your biceps really are weak, they might actually be a limiting factor. But if you're someone who has been doing lat pull downs or rows or anything instead of just deadlifts for your back, especially if you've done any curls at any point in the last few months, your biceps might be a minor limiting factor. But here's the way to look at it. If you're taking an exercise like chin-ups and you're taking your chin-ups to a relatively high work volume, if your biceps are the weakest muscle in there, doesn't that mean you're going to maximize hypertrophy in your biceps? In other words, if you are stuck and you can no longer do any more workload with chin-ups because your biceps are failing, you have probably maximally stimulated your biceps. Doesn't that mean your biceps are probably going to grow a hair faster? I mean, think about it. Furthermore, people have this idea that because they have one muscle that's a little bit weak on a compound movement, that the other muscles aren't getting stimulated. That's not true. It doesn't work in the sense of, let's say you take a chin-up or a bench press, and you have one muscle in the exercise that isn't quite putting out strength in proportion to the others. All that means is that you do less weight. Your lats don't work less hard because your biceps aren't quite strong enough to get one more rep, because your lats are still contracting. And that's what you have to remember with a big exercise with multiple muscles involved. All the muscles can be hitting upper threshold fibers, even if some of them are a weak link. It doesn't work that way that, oh, your biceps aren't going to grow because your back is the weak link, or your back isn't going to grow because your biceps are the weak link. What that means is that the weak link is very likely just to receive slightly more training stimulus. It doesn't mean it's going to get double the training stimulus. It's just going to get a slightly better growth response. That's why big movements like chin-ups are such a fantastic exercise, because they can make multiple muscles grow at the same time. Right? That's why chin-ups are a really fantastic exercise. They hit so many muscles in the body, or mainly the upper body, obviously. Chin-ups are a great exercise. That's a perfect example. You don't get less stimulation because you have a muscle that's a weak link, because you have a weak link on every exercise. Every exercise has a weak link. If it didn't, you would be lifting 20,000 pounds. Something is a weak link somewhere, or you would be able to lift unlimited amounts of weight. It's always a limiting factor. But it doesn't mean the other muscles don't grow because of that. And the weak link does get better by training it. All right, hopefully that clears that up. All right, next question. Hey Jason, I do squats astagraphs without pausing at the bottom, because from what I've heard from you and Mark Rippetoe, it's important to get a stretch reflex. But I see you now and others doing squats with a pause. Can you talk about this and why to do one or the other? Thank you. You know what? This is an enormous debate, and honestly, I believe both are useful. Some people believe in doing one or the other. I legitimately believe that if you want the strongest possible squat, it's beneficial to do both squats with a pause and squats with a stretch reflex, and you do not always have to do them in the same phase of your training. And as far as I know, I don't think I've heard Rippetoe mention the pause squats. I don't know what his stance is on that. But a lot of world record holders and strength and conditioning coaches in the squat do pause squats. I'm a big believer in pause squats because they train you to get stronger out of the bottom. They train you to get tighter at the bottom. And when you do switch over to use a stretch reflex, that will carry over into more poundages because it forces you to learn to accelerate faster and engage more muscles at the bottom, and it forces you to refine your technique out of the bottom of the movement. That's what it does. I think for general build-up, they both can work. I just think that the pause squat is a valuable tool. But, you know, would I be training the pause squat if I was peaking for a max squat in a competition? No. But I think it's a great way to build up all those muscles. In fact, I'd go so far as to say that if the goal was just general hypertrophy and strength, and you were never planning on doing a powerlifting meet, and you just wanted a really strong squat, you wanted well-developed legs, core, glutes, all of that, I would have most people consider doing the pause squat most of the time. The only downside, it may not build things like your thoracic rectors and stuff up quite as much because you're going to be forced to use a slightly lighter weight. So, you know, there's a trade-off. There's a trade-off there. It is what it is, but it's a valuable tool. I utilize it. A lot of people utilize it. It's not a necessary tool, just like the stretch reflex isn't a necessary tool on the squat unless you're training for a max squat. It's not necessary for general buildup. But then again, neither is the pause. I think it's just a valuable tool. Again, major point of debate in the strength and conditioning world, and you're going to find different perspectives on it. All right, next question. If you're already stimulating maximum growth through the compound movements, what is the point, in your opinion, of doing a secondary movement to bring up a lagging muscle group? The purpose of doing that to bring up a lagging muscle group is because you didn't receive maximum stimulation on the compound movement. The other thing to factor in is boredom. Boredom. A lot of people don't want to do 10 or 12 sets of one exercise in a workout. Just something to factor in there. So secondary movements are, in my opinion, oftentimes more beneficial for psychological reasons than anything else. I don't think they're completely necessary. But it kind of comes back to the point of, you said, if you're getting maximal muscle stimulation from the compounds. Well, if you are, then there probably isn't much benefit from it. The question becomes, is occasionally when we have a weak link, there isn't scientific data to prove that doing isolation movements behind a compound taken with enough volume will produce more growth. We don't have strong evidence for that. All we have is anecdote. So what essentially you are doing with a secondary movement is basically what I would describe as an insurance policy, that you're concerned you have a muscle that might be lagging, and you want to do something to ensure that it grows at a better proportion, so you do some additional work for it. That doesn't guarantee that it's going to, because you might have already reached your maximum recoverable volume, and you might have already exceeded well over your minimum effective volume for that muscle group. So in some cases, if it's going to impact your recovery, or that secondary movement's going to cause basically a recovery issue, or if it's going to cause any issue with, say, connective tissue inflammation, things like that, then it's hurting you to do it. If it isn't necessary and you're doing it, it isn't impeding your recovery, all you've done is waste a little time. And if you really were understimulating that muscle, then it's, again, just an insurance policy to ensure a little more growth. You know, that's one of those philosophies we could argue about in circles, and you can look at it in any direction you want, but all I will say is that if you choose to do a secondary movement for a lagging body part, there's nothing wrong with that if you're wanting to do it as an insurance policy. Just make sure that it's not negatively impacting your recovery, and if it is, it's something to reevaluate. But odds are, doing a secondary smaller exercise, you know, let's say you did a bunch of chin-ups and deadlifts and you're worried your curls didn't get enough. You want to do some curls, do some curls. You want to do a little bit of rear delts, do some rear delts. It's probably not going to affect your recovery as long as your bicep tendons aren't getting inflamed. Pretty straightforward way to look at it. It's not going to really hurt you 90% of the time to do it unless you go overboard with it. All right, next question. Hi, Jason. If someone is doing bench press on Monday and standing press on Thursday, would it make sense to do incline close grip bench on Monday and flat close grip bench on Thursday after presses? You know, it kind of comes back to that other question you asked me about secondary exercises. Yeah, if you think you need more volume and you feel like you need those muscles to be hit slightly differently, that's fine. But the question becomes, you're like, which one do I put where? I'm going to argue that since these exercises are all working the same basic muscles, and you're doing them on the same days, and you're not really adjusting frequency or volume depending on which one you pick, I don't think it's really, in the grand scheme of things, going to matter which one you put in which day. I think when people get to that degree of overanalyzing a secondary movement or an accessory exercise, we're walking into paralysis by analysis. I don't think it's going to matter. If you can't decide, flip a coin on which one to put on which day. How's that sound? It's probably not going to matter in any meaningful way. All right, next question and last question of the week. What are your thoughts on Bostin Loyd and his girlfriend having a baby? Do you think all their past drug abuse will cause issues? Man, that's a tough question. I honestly hope not. I hope it doesn't. I really hope it doesn't. Is it a concern? Yeah, the first thing that popped in my head when I saw that she was pregnant, they were going to have a baby, that was my knee-jerk response. And I thought to myself, oh man, I hope that doesn't happen. And the only reason I worry about that is anecdote. We don't know. We don't know what abusing anabolics will do to sperm quality, egg quality, things like that. We have no idea based upon the scientific literature to know what the risks are. In my own anecdote, I'm not going to name names, but I do know a couple who are very, very nice people. Both gear users historically, at least allegedly. I don't know that for an absolute fact. Allegedly, and their first child had some major health issues. Was it related to the gear? We don't know. We absolutely don't know. So since I've seen that happen at least once, that was my knee-jerk response. But how do I feel about it? I really and truly hope that their child comes out okay. I hope that their child is perfectly healthy and happy. And I wish them the best on that, because whatever me poking a little bit of fun every now and then at Bostin Loyd, I don't dislike the person. I don't think he's a terrible person. And even if I thought he was, I would absolutely not want to see someone, have a problem with a child due to some of their past use of things. I really don't want to see that, because the child doesn't deserve to suffer for something like that. And I think it would be really tragic if that's the case. So what I would say to people, why don't we just all focus on putting a little positive thought into it and positive energy, and let's just all hope for the best. Let's hope for the best and let them do their amniocentesis or whatever, and let them find out for themselves and make their own decisions and go from there. And let's just wish them the best with it. I think that's the best thing any of us can do. We can wish them the best and put positive energy into it. I know that sounds a little fruity, but it is what it is. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.